What's not? Yeah, it is. Oh, there we have Reverend Child. Ms. Collins. Here. Rito. Here. Dr. Schulwitz. Here. Ms. Jordan. Here. Ms. Lau. Here. Mr. Michael.
Here.
Mr. Shaughnessy.
Here.
Ms. Shield. Here. Please stand for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we've reached the portion of the meeting where we welcome public participation. Is there anyone who would like to address the board at this juncture? You have 2 minutes if you wish to do so. It's not a conversation. And our board clerk will let you know when you're approaching the 2 minutes. The policy for addressing the board during public meeting is should be on the podium. Is it there? Yes. Okay. All right, is there anyone who would like to address the board at this point? Okay. Hearing no takers.
Okay. So we'll move on to board recognition, and tonight we have a very exciting evening. Something that I want to thank Dr. Roberts and everyone from SUNY Ulster for working with us to get this opportunity for our students. We talked about it last spring. I think Dr. Roberts came and talked about it. We were really lucky and happy and pleased to be able to get a jump start this year instead of having to wait till next year. And I want to thank Ms. Bondville for stepping in and grabbing this and really guiding our district through this and working with SUNY Ulster to make it happen. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Bondville, and she will give you the rest of the story.
Thank you to the Board of Education for allowing our partners, SUNY Ulster, to be here this evening. We are absolutely thrilled with our 5 students, and thank you to our 5 students and to their families for all of your help and for your support of your students. I cannot tell you how gratifying a process this was, not only in reading the essays, but certainly I think we were absolutely blown away during the interview process. So we really have some great students, and I know that Mr. Reinhardt is very proud of these 5 students, all of his students, but these 5 students tonight. So congratulations to all of you. I'm going to turn it over to President Roberts from SUNY Ulster, as well as Lorraine Salmon, who's the Executive Director.
Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone for what an incredible partnership it's been. Paul's been absolutely open arms ever since we came. We chatted about the opportunity to bring the scholarships to 8th graders. It's unique. It's different. Our goal is to bring 200 first-time in college students to SUNY Ulster at the end of 5 years. Right now, we started with 6 2 years ago. We're up to 12. And by the end of the year, we'll have 56 in the pipeline. And by the end of 5 years, we're going to have 200 that are going to be constantly working with SUNY Ulster, getting those prerequisites done ahead of time. So when they hit 2 years free education, but we're going to work with them for the next 4 years to ensure that they have the right classes. So when they enter, there's no remediation. You're hitting the road, you're going to get it done in 2 years. But the partnership has been truly a blessing, nothing short of been amazing. Open arms, you've given us everything we've asked for, and hopefully we've been good citizens too. We were not going to say too much more, but today really is, this evening is really a time to recognize the 5 students that we chose for this year. We got 5 more coming next year, and 5, actually we're going to do 10 next year. So it's an exciting program, it's first, it's unique, and I don't think there's too many like this in the country. So thank you for being our partner. I'll turn it over to Lorraine now.
Hi, good evening. I just add to that when we're fully rolled out, we'll have 5 students in each of the 9 school districts and 10 students in Kingston. So that's the 50 per class times 4 years, 9th, 10th, and 11th, and 12th grade, and there's your 200. So now you kind of have a vision of where we're all going. And with that, we're about to announce the 5 students that represent the inaugural class for the Kingston Consolidated School District. We're so pleased. I'm going to ask the students to please come up. You're going to come over here and shake President Roberts' hand and line up over here for some photos. So I'd like to introduce you to and congratulate Magdalena Cruz, who's sponsored by the Kingston Sunrise Rotary. with us? That's great. I would like to congratulate and welcome Jenna Coddington, who's sponsored by Kathleen and Bill Clunan. I would like to congratulate and ask to come up to the podium Riley Denham, sponsored by Anna and Ken Brett. Thank you. I would like to congratulate and welcome Shailene Maldonado, sponsored by Dr. Anne Monroe. The fifth student, I would like to congratulate and welcome Mikhail Scott, sponsored by Harris Safer and Robert Thomas. One big class photo. Over here. That is great. Grab it a little more. There we go. Beautiful. Did she make you promise some pictures? Big smile, everybody. So I would just like to say in closing that these students represent First and Family to make their intention to go to college, and we're so excited to have them join. We'll be up to 200 students, and they'll be coming over to the college, and we'll be coming here to you, and we'll keep you posted along the way, Lord, because we'd like to make you back as well. Thank you for your time.
Good job.
Oh, yeah.
I know everyone is busy going because our award winners and their parents are all busy going out there. I did want to mention and maybe just give you a little bit more background. And you heard Ms. Salmon talk about the sponsors. So what that is those are members of the Kingston community. Many of on this list you all probably know who have put up the money to sponsor these scholarships for these students. So when these students go and get to SUNY Ulster, this money is already there, and they've pledged that to really support these students financially through this program. And when they get to SUNY Ulster, so as Lorraine said, we have 5 now, and we have 5 more coming. So they have already secured these sponsors. So people came forward pretty quickly to want to sponsor students and make sure that they get to college education, especially our first-time college students. So it's great, really exciting program, I think.
Will those sponsors be recognized in the minutes?
I think I think we're going to. I know letters have been written to the sponsors and thanking them, and actually they were invited. And I think there may have been a couple here tonight. Sponsors have been invited to come here, so. We're just starting our relationship in this, so we're kind of in, I know there's going to be 50 countywide this year, which is great. We're still feeling our way through this. But it's new, it's exciting, and I think it's going to really make a difference for kids.
Will you give us information in the future as to how people become sponsors for more students?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, we'll turn forward to your budget presentation.
Okay, so now we go from good news to the budget.
First one, Lieutenant Governor is here.
No, Mr. Vita.
Now it all makes sense.
Oh, beautiful. I won't take it personally that everyone left the room when I got up here. So tonight is obviously a single agenda item board meeting, and we're here to talk about the budget. What I'm going to do is just going to go through a few slides, talk to you a little bit about our budget and our what's going to happen on May 15th, and then really I think more of a conversation and answer questions. And I know our business department is here also to support the board and myself and as we talk about this. So just so you know what's going to be on the proposition on May 15th. We have 4 or 5 things on the proposition now. That's an addition of one since we last spoke about the budget. Obviously, the first is the budget. The second is the creation of a new capital reserve fund. The third is our capital reserve projects, which are renovations at JFK, Edson, and Miller Middle School. The fourth is the election of 3 school board members. And the fifth that was just added at our last board meeting is the transfer of ownership of Dietz Stadium to the city of Kingston. As always, we start with our budget goals. Our number 1 goal is always to design a budget that balances the needs of our students with our community's values and their ability to pay. We have several other goals, and one of the goals, unwritten goals that I think we need to start writing to remember is the real goal and the important goal of the budget is to make sure that we have the programs and the support for our students so they can continue to learn and to grow. I always like to talk a little bit about tax levy limit, and I know it's boring for many people who hear me, but I always would say it's not a tax cap, and it's not 2%. We know that the tax levy limit is a different number, different percentage every year. It's different for every school district, as I'll show you in a few minutes. I think it's important to mention that the Kingston City School District has always had, since the tax levy limit was put into place, we have always put a tax levy or a budget out that was below the tax levy limit. The calculation that I talk about, complicated calculation, it's never, very rarely, I won't say never, very rarely 2%, and it's different every year. Illustrated here, we look at last year's tax levy limit was 1.35. This year's tax levy limit, driven by different things in the calculation, is 3.6. So the maximum we could levy our community is a 3.6% increase in our tax levy, as you can see here. What does that mean? Okay, so now just getting into the nuts and bolts of the calculation and how it impacts what we're doing and what we want to do. We see our tax levy limit at 3.6. Here are our appropriations. These are our expenditures for the year. Our state aid, so let's talk about our revenues. State aid, last time we spoke, we had a different number under state aid. We had the governor's proposal. So the governor's proposal was just what he put out there. Now, as of April 1st, late Friday night, we found out, and early Saturday morning, we found out what our aid runs look like. And we do see an increase in our state aid for the school district, an increase of about $1.2 million from year to year. So from last year to this year, about a little over a 4% increase in aid. Now, and from the governor's budget that we talked about a couple weeks ago, we're talking about $380,000 increase in state aid. Now, you saw what the numbers looked like with the governor's budget. And $300,000 did not close that gap. Okay? You'll see as you look through the calculation, we have closed the gap significantly, more than the $300,000 that we talked about in new aid. And we did that as we worked through the budget. And we were going to continue over the next several weeks to work through the budget to bring to you on the 18th a balanced budget for the Kingston City School District. But there are a lot of different things going on in this calculation, including, so I want to make sure that we're talking about, that you know what we're talking about here. Our first rendition of this showed a $1 million input from our $1 million from our reserves. This shows $2 million put in from our reserves to cut that number down. So what we see here is what we talked about last time is staying under the 2% at 1.99. If we were to do that, we still have, over the next couple of weeks, a gap of about $641,000 that we have to find, either find through efficiencies. Well, we have to find through efficiencies, Phil, because at this point our revenues are set. That's what we're getting. There are no more revenues coming in. The different tax levy calculations that we also want to put up there just for the board's information and community's information. If we went to a 2.62 tax levy limit, which is, we would have a balanced budget. At 3.6, which is our tax levy limit, we would be about $1 million to the good, $991,000 to good. Now again, we want to make sure we know that we put $2 million in fund balance in there. So that's kind of a misleading number, but we did put $2 million in reserves into the budget this year as well. So it's not as if we're doing something that we hadn't done in the past. At 2.5, we would have a $125,000 hole, and again, as I talked about, the 1.99 staying under the 2%, we are still looking for about $641,000 in balance. And I want to emphasize something. This is as is. This is a rollover budget. This is a budget that will cut no jobs, but it's not adding any new programs. It's not looking at and doing anything new and different. Now, I don't want to say it means we're not going to do anything new or different. So I don't want that to be confusing either. We're looking at, as we're going through the budget, we're looking at what we are doing and seeing where our priorities are. And talking about if we have certain priorities that we think we need to do, we need to look and see what are the things that maybe we're doing that we can find efficiencies, or things that we're doing that maybe aren't as effective as we want them to be. So the pie is always going to be what the pie is. How we cut that up is going to be about our priorities and what we want to see happen in the Kingston City School District. Up to this point, I will say, I think that I said this last year, and I'll say it this year. You know, I'm a believer in staying the course. We've put a lot of new programs in place in the last 4 years, and many of them we've seen the fruits of our investment. Many of them we are starting to see that, and I think that last year and the year before we put a lot of support around our students' mental health, putting more psychologists and social workers in the school buildings. We put a lot of support around curriculum with our instructional coaches and our assistant directors. We put a lot of things in place, and we're seeing what we're seeing academically because of that. So I still am a believer of staying the course, and I continuously talk about our graduation rate and our low retention rate in the 9th grade, and how we see those things building and improving. So that doesn't mean we're set in stone with what we're doing. We are looking at everything we're doing to see where we can find efficiencies and changes where we need to make changes. Quickly about the Capital Reserve Fund. The Capital Reserve Fund that we're asking the voters to approve will allow us to put some money aside, whether it's unexpended appropriations or monies that were received from, let's say, a windfall like selling a Sione building, that we can put that in there and kind of put in there for future renovations or future needs, or if there's an emergency that we need to use some capital reserves in our buildings. The voters allow us to do this, we would do that. We have a maximum of $10 million we could put in, and we would have it there for 10 years, at which point we would have to have depleted it over those 10 years. Current capital reserve projects. The community has allowed us, given us approval to establish a capital reserve in the past. We've put money into that account, and now we see some needs in our buildings. We're going to use that money to really fulfill these needs. And as we talked about before, Edson Elementary, Miller Middle School, and John F. Kennedy are where we see the most urgent needs as far as our capital projects in this district. Not really in a lot of detail of what we're doing, but the thing I always say about capital reserve projects is they tend to be nuts and bolts. They tend to be things that aren't too exciting. They tend to be floors. They tend to be ADA requirement. They tend to be remediation of asbestos. They tend to be windows, electricity, heating, cooling, roofs, those kind of things. And that's really what we're looking at. Selective window replacement is going to be something you'll hear over and over again in these next 3 slides. These buildings are not new. And the windows and those kind of things are original, many of them not working, many of them falling out. So these are things that need to be done. Anyone who's driven into any of our schools, you know, the schools that we have not done the improvements in the walkways and the driveways, they definitely need it. So you see that at Edson. You're going to see a lot of that at John F. Kennedy as well as some emergency lighting, some mechanical upgrades, and we talk about selective window replacement. I guess it only kind of makes sense that if we're going to be replacing windows in Edson, we're going to be replacing windows in JFK because they are the same building, same year, same design, same architect, same windows. So it makes sense that they're both having this need at the same time. Miller Middle School, I said we don't do a lot of exciting things, but there is one exciting thing in this, and this is really the auditorium renovations at Miller Middle School. Anyone who's attended any events at Miller Middle School knows that those are in need of replacement, in need of renovation. New seats need to happen. You know, the seats are gone. There's many missing. They pull them out so no one sits in them because they're broken. Those kind of things. Acoustics aren't great. I always point to this picture here because you can see the runner that comes down there is being held down by duct tape. These are things we need to address within Miller Middle School. But again, the other things that aren't quite as exciting: emergency lighting, electrical panel boards, selective window replacement, similar problems. So we are doing a lot of work in these 3 buildings. And what is this going to cost? So the maximum allowable, maximum we can spend on these projects is $16 million. And that's a combination of our current capital reserve fund as well as our state aid. So combining those 2 things, we can spend $16 million and there'll be no additional cost to our local taxpayers. So that's an important piece. So I'll say it again, there'll be no additional cost to our local taxpayers. So that $16 million worth of work will be done, again, with our capital reserve and with the money we receive from state aid on those buildings. So we're really asking the community just to allow us to spend that money from our capital reserves and leverage it against state aid, no additional costs. Things we've done in the past with this, I think it's important to show a track record of being effective and responsible and successful in the use of our capital reserve funds. So the things we've done in the past, many things. We've put in new roofs, we've put in new wiring, we've done a lot of different maintenance projects with this. We've really tried to keep our buildings, really the envelope is what we looked at advice. We talk about roofs. Roofs are the big things. We spent $3.3 million on a roof at Miller a couple of years ago. Making sure our buildings are ADA compliant, making sure that they are safe and healthy, removing asbestos. Those are the kind of things we've done in the past. I think it's important for people to know that we've spent that money, we've spent it well, and our buildings are better for it, and our students are in a better place, safer, warmer, healthier. Board of Election, we have 3 trustees up for election. So just so you know, there's 3 open seats, the 3-year terms. They would begin July of this year. And another important piece is the deadline to have your the petitions in. We're happy about that July 1 term. Petitions need to be in. They can be picked up by from Ms. DePerna in her office, and they need to be to her by the end of business on April 25th. Going backwards for a second, I do want to talk about the newest thing on our ballot on May 15th, which will be the transfer of ownership from Dietz Stadium to the City of Kingston. It's important to understand that Dietz Stadium is in need of repair. We've talked about this for, well, I've been here for 6 years, so we've at least been talking about it for 6 years. And one of the understandings between the city and the district, which co-own Dietz Stadium, is whoever could really get the money, we wanted to see who could do it, to make sure that we can have these renovations. And right now, through a grant from New York State, the City of Kingston will be able to put a significant amount of money, upwards near $3 million, into Dietz Stadium. This is money that the school district cannot put in there. And if we did want to put it in there, again, we would have to put it out to the voters. It would have to be, and then that money spent would have to be paid for by the voters. This is coming through a state grant, and will have no impact on our local taxpayers. Now, in order for them to do that successfully, similarly, for us to be able to put out a building project successfully for Dietz Stadium, they need to own it, and we would need to own it if we did that. So we are asking our community to give us permission to discuss transferring the ownership. So it's not this, the voters aren't voting and it's going to go over. The voters are voting just to allow the Board of Education to communicate and negotiate and collaborate with the City of Kingston and then decide whether or not it is in the best interest of the Kingston City School District to enter into that agreement and transfer the ownership. So again, I think it's important for our community to know that. This isn't, the vote doesn't say, yes, it's definitely going. It says, yes, the district can discuss it, and if they feel it's in the best interest of the district, the community, the school board can vote to enter this agreement. From our viewpoint right now, it's our last best hope for Dean Stadium, as far as we're concerned, to look at being able to put $3 million into that stadium with no impact on our local taxpayers is a pretty big deal, and something that I didn't see coming, and I don't think the mayor saw coming. One of the concerns from the community, and I think one of the concerns of the board, one of the concerns of our students and our parents is probably, can we still use that stadium? And that is our home, right? That's where the Tigers play. And my understanding with the mayor, and we are both on the same page, is our use of the stadium will not change. Now, will we be contributing for the use of that stadium? Absolutely, as we should and as we do now. But the first priority for the Kingston City School District would be one of those things that's just a non-negotiable. And the mayor understands that. I think we're totally on the same page. Okay. I'm sure there are many questions. So. Ready when you are. Well, I should say, Mrs. Woodard and Mr. Olson are ready.
I don't know if I have a question, but I just think if anybody ever watches this on YouTube, it's important for them to understand that the Capital Reserve Fund is so important for us to be able to maintain our buildings, and we have tried very hard, I think, to keep abreast of all the issues coming up. And with Mr. Clapper's help and the crew, around the district, if we don't have set aside that money, it's just terrible planning. So I think it's really important for the public to understand that the reason we're asking for that fund is so important, and that we get much more back if we save that money up front. So I think it's really important that voters understand why.
And I think it's a really good point for voters to understand that we do have a significant amount of money coming in very soon for the sale of Sione, and that is a great place for us to put that money to save the community and our taxpayers in the future from having to be levied for building projects or capital projects that can come up. It's a vehicle that we've used. This would be the second capital reserve vehicle, proposition that we put out as a vehicle of improvement for our schools.
Not a question either, but a comment on the transfer of Dean Stadium. I'm glad that you clarified that, because a few people had asked me, they heard the mayor talk about it, and it seemed like it was a done deal that the building was going to be transferred to them because of the $10 million. I'm glad that it's saying it's open for discussion. We can make a decision as to what we're going to do. So
I think if you remember a few years back, we did a similar proposition to put out there for voters to give us approval to sell this building and to sell our elementary schools. They were closed, and so but it took us a few years, to make that happen. So we're just asking for voters' permission to enter those negotiations. And again, at the end of the day, the board will make the decision if it's the best interest of the district.
There won't be another referendum.
No, there does not have to be another referendum.
So this really is permission to sell.
This is permission for the board to sell. Should you it's handing over the responsibility of the board to make the best decision for the school district regarding the transfer of that property.
So you said that, so this is a rollover budget, essentially, what you've given us. And I know in the past we've expressed kind of what our priorities are, and then those are the things that surface in the budget, like keeping class size low, K2, the coaches have been a priority for us, social emotional learning, which I think we're kind of tinkering around the edges, and I'd like to see us move a little bit forward ahead. But can you talk a little bit about what you envision? You said you're a state-of-the-course guy, right? So what do you envision continuing in this next round, and what are the kind of newer priorities that you think will be important as we move forward towards some of our newer goals?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think expanding our social emotional learning initiative, as well as expanding our restorative justice initiative, are very important parts. I don't put, I shouldn't say this to the board, not all of that has a lot of dollar figures around it. A lot of it has to do with rethinking how we work. I think that the one thing about restorative justice that we are, when we say tinkering around the edges, we are tinkering around the edges on restorative justice. You know, and I've talked to the board about this in the past, you know, training is required, it's time consuming. You know, one of the priorities that we have moving forward, and it doesn't sound like it would have much to do with social emotional learning, but is support at the middle school level. It's for little school in putting in a restorative justice model and increasing our social emotional programs and our implementation of those programs. We talk about them a lot, and there's little bits of it going on. But, you know, the truth of the matter is it takes about 3 minutes to suspend a student. It takes about an hour and a half to work through a restorative justice process. You know, and when you have, at our elementary or middle schools, we have 2 administrators, 1,100 students in Bailey, 2 administrators, 900 students at Miller. One administrator spending an hour and a half with 1 student or 2 students leaves a lot, and doing, you know, annual professional performance reviews and all the other responsibilities of an administrator are, it's a challenge, and that's one of the biggest challenges. And I think moving forward is figuring out how are we going to provide that support at that level. I think the high school has a good handle on things with their administration. I think they're working through how they're going to do it a little better, but I think middle school it's really going to be about resources. So moving into the future, and maybe not into too far future, I think some support in that level for the middle schools. And the other piece of the middle school is some support around elementary curriculum in the 5th and 6th grades. Something we've been talking about a lot as teaching and learning with the teaching and learning. So those are some big priorities that I think dovetail with the things that we've already put in place and are supporting. So yeah, that's what I see in the future.
So I agree with, you've kind of conflated a bunch of things and I put a bunch of things together, which I think is right. Like I think that we do need more to think about more support at the middle school level. That will require some resources. I think that we do need to focus more specifically and deliberately on the implementation of our social emotional learning, and I think that does require resources. When we talk about training, that's staff, that's time, that's people. And we've seen, even as we tinker around the restorative justice edges, that how effective those models can be, but that they take time, and it takes a while to learn how to do it. And so that's more time and that's more training. And so, you know, I'm hopeful that in this new budget that we'll be able to dedicate some resources to those things, to administrative support, but then also separately and in addition, social emotional learning. But kind of going along with that, I'd also like us to, and I think we've talked about this a little bit, when we closed the elementary schools and we moved up to the middle school and we reconfigured, we created an administrative structure. And I think it's time to look at it, and I think it's time to kind of go back and make sure that we are where we need to be. And we talk a little bit about doing a review of the structure and whether it's right for us. And so, to my mind, that is part of what needs to happen is we think about the cost of administration and we think about how we prioritize these other elements also moving forward.
And I think you know, and many board members have had non-board meeting conversations with about that. And those are things that we are talking about now. What is our administrative structure? When we put this administrative structure in place, it was right for that time. You know, we were looking at implementing the Common Core. We were looking at huge changes in curriculum and the way we expected teachers to teach. And that required, in our opinion, and I think what we saw happen proves it out, we required more assistance to our building level administrators and more assistance to our teachers to help them make those changes. Well, we're kind of in a different place now, and now we're looking at different priorities. So I think we've talked about this, and I think several board members we've talked about this. One of the things we're looking at and working with the teaching and learning department about is what is the next step for us around how we can most effectively support the work that's going on in our schools. I do want to say one other thing that I kind of lied, and I don't want to, and I'm sure someone will catch me on it, so I don't want to go further without saying it. I said this is a rolling budget. There is, in this budget, there is about $1 million more than you saw last time in the special education lines. So I want to make sure that, and again, special education, I think when we look at what special education is costing the school district, it's a lot. I mean, you know, we spend a lot of money in support of our students with disabilities, as we should. I mean, we need to make sure students are getting what they need. We need to, and we've looked at it in several different ways. We looked at different things. But one of the important things for us to know is, I think, while it's going to take a little while for this to work, we have already put in place the mechanism for that in looking at our UPK and opening the Mahar, UPK Center. So that's one of the things that we find our classifications at the early levels are about learning deficits, not necessarily learning disabilities. And to move through that by having our students come to school in 5th grade, ready for 5th grade, when they're 5 years old, when they're 5 years old, ready for school, is going to help us in that area. That's like a mortgage, right? I mean, we're making a long-term investment there. But that, is one of those things that I want to see 7 or 8 years. When we can really look at that data to see the success that it will have in getting in there early.
So are you saying that, for example, I looked through the budget, I didn't see any money allocated to the pre-K program that we're going to be doing? Is that included someplace that I might have missed? Or?
No, the pre-K program we won't be putting that in place until September of 2019. So that's not in this year's budget, that will be next year's budget. So this is the 18-19 budget, but we'll be voting on that next year, September of 19. So next year when I'm standing up here, we'll be talking about where we're getting that money. And again, we're actively and aggressively looking at money outside of our regular contingent budget to support that program. And I think that looking for the right staff, looking for making sure we're getting the staff that's going to serve the population that we want to serve, which we've said before, we want to look at our students who don't traditionally go to our UPK program. We're looking at our English language learners. We're looking at our students who free reduced lunch. I think you'll probably all receive an invitation in a few days from Dr. Felicello. We have a group of a dozen students from City College who are taking a road trip to Kingston to learn about Kingston and possibly work in our UPK program, who are a diverse group with multiple language certifications and looking at those are the kind of teachers we want to see in our UPK program. So they're going to come up, they're going to take a nice tour with us. We're going to show them why they want to come live and work in Kingston. We didn't know we were actually the travel agents also.
Hashtag Mrs. Kingston. I know we're talking about this year's budget, but when you're speaking about the pre-K budget, is something that I feel really passionately about is that the hiring of an outreach worker, bilingual, or social worker, or someone to be because if you want to reach these hard to reach people, I'm assuming, I know this is what we're talking about, but I think it's really needs to be a priority in order to form those community relations.
Yeah. And we have, as you all know, one of the goals the board has set for the superintendent is by July 1st, I will bring you the plan for opening that program, and that's what we're working on, and we'll have that ready.
You brought up your budget,
This is Jordan.
In line with that, I guess, but also in line with what Dr. Jacobowitz was talking about, I wonder if, I know that there has been an effort to reach out to community partners, but now might be an even more timely need to make sure that we have really exhausted any contacts that our community partners and agencies have in terms of our restorative justice initiatives and social emotional learning, because a lot of this is coming together and kind of coalescing at the state level in terms of the funding mechanisms for this. And I think that there might be more money available to both our partners and the agencies in our community and even the city government, if we all kind of go through this process together. Because I think a lot of what we talked about, or what was talked about in the workshop I went on restorative justice, was the fact that there are places where the communities are trying to adopt it as not just in the schools, but as part of the community kind of culture. And if we really want to make a change in the culture in our schools, we're going to have to really do that. Otherwise, it's not really going to work.
And we're aggressively going after grants around this, and We have our community partners tied in together on it. We've also met with the county. The county is pushing restorative justice. I'm actually meeting with the county executive Tuesday morning for us to talk further about partnering. Sometimes the same amount of money goes a lot further when there's when we're all in it together. So I think that's kind of the thing. And we also, from an implementation standpoint, if the county and the city are working on restorative justice and the school district is working on restorative justice, we want to make sure we're all speaking the same language. So restorative justice from the county doesn't look different than it does in the city. Now, obviously there's some differences with school-age students and how they maybe want to deal with maybe some older students, or older people. But the idea of us all working together and speaking the same language is definitely important. And we've opened that conversation a couple of months ago, continuing that conversation next Tuesday with the county executive. And I think as far as city and county government and the school district, we want the same thing. We just have to make sure that we sit down and we're speaking the same language.
Right.
And I think the money is like said.
Right. In terms of the trainings within the community, I think it would be great to have people from different areas training together, because then they're going to be able to communicate at
Right.
that time.
And our dollars go further that way also.
Right, exactly. So I'm hoping that might be a resource for us.
Okay. And then Mrs. Collins.
So you mentioned, or one thing that we talked about, the TNL meeting recently, we looked at our data around reading and math, and there's some deficiencies in reading in the middle schools, but then also you can see kind of where that comes from in elementary grades. And I'm wondering what you're thinking about in terms of literacy support and for our youngest students. I mean, I know you've talked about the pre-K, but you don't want to wait.
No, there's the long-term and short-term, and there's the triage, right? There's the three different levels. You know, I think one of the things, again, not waiting to see the fruit of it, but we're seeing it, is the change in our reading instruction that we made for this year. The move away from reading recovery to a more open model where our reading teachers use their expertise to decide what reading strategy is best for students. And so we're serving more students than we were serving in the past, so I think we'll see some improvements through that. We also, many of our teachers have taken, and we're going to continue this training around Orton-Gillingham, which is that multi-sensory approach towards reading, which we are going to make sure that our teachers all have that in their toolbox as well. So trying to expand the toolbox and also giving the freedom to the experts who are teaching our students reading to use the strategies that are appropriate for those students that are in front of them, because I don't know what's appropriate for the student. I'm not the one there. Our teachers know their students best.
So there'll be extra funding in this budget for additional professional development for early literacy?
I think we have, as far as what we've had our early literacy trainings come out mostly out of our title money, so it's not in this money, and we don't see that in our regular budget, so you don't really see where our title money's been spent around that. So we will continue to support that training moving forward. And we have a 3-year plan with the Orton-Gillingham to make sure that we have as many people trained as possible. So I think we're going to see, it's one of those things where we're going to see in June, and then we'll see how that grows with that change in reading. And then with the addition of Orton-Gillingham, how is that growing as far as our reading? And when we look at the middle school level, I know the teaching and learning team is going to meet tomorrow with the teaching and learning committee to talk about some changes that our teaching and learning team and our middle school principals have made to improve and increase the amount of time and effort put towards reading and math at the middle school level. So they've tried to take it, pie is the same, how do we cut it up differently? They look at the pie as far as their day and their resources and how can they cut it up differently to really address that weakness. And that really was using the data. We saw what the reading looked like. And they said, how can we rearrange our day to get more opportunity for students with, to really drill down specifically in reading and math with special, strategies and instruction around those things. So I think we're moving in the right direction with those things for sure.
Just a general question at first. This is the first presentation that you've done, at least to us, I believe. So we're just doing general in terms of our priorities or areas that we'd like to see instead of line-by-line questions?
You can do either.
We're
ready for whatever you want to do.
Just to state, first of all, I do agree with what's been said as far as social emotional learning, keeping the programs. As Mrs. Jordan said, restorative justice, I know that Reverend Child serves on a committee with County Executive Hein. So I know we're making great strides and all that. I would also say, I agree, that I think that after a few years, it's great to look, take a step back, analyze where we are in terms of our structure. And if we did have anything extra, I think also safety is a huge component. I see that we're in the enviable position to have a new building, first of all, which is a great thing, but I think the more chiefs appreciate boots on the ground in today's atmosphere, I think would be helpful. And I'm thinking of that, and I'm looking at some of these things, and I was just curious. I know we give an awful lot of money to BOCES, and I know that the programs are great, but I do have a couple of questions as far as that goes. Do we utilize their grant writer? You were just talking about grants, because I know we have communication specialists now too. I don't know if that's their role or.
Well, we utilize their grant writer for very specific things, and we write grants on our own for other things. I know that their grant writer has recently retired, so we're kind of in flux with that program, how we're going to move forward. But you know, we did receive some assistance with our title grants, which are, you know, a monster. They're the kind of things that our administrators would spend all of August doing without a little bit of that assistance. So we use them a lot around our title grants. So yeah, there are certain places where that really helps, but there's other places where we need to go out on our own and look for grants.
It wasn't a huge amount. I was just curious. And then along those lines too, and this is a BOCES thing, and I think this is from, you know, sort of the seat that I occupy here. Board docs. You know, that's a lot of money, and I think that that's something else that we should probably analyze as a board. I know I look at the cost of paper and copier maintenance. That's astronomical. I mean, I wish we could be more green, but I also know that a lot of people want to receive a hard copy of a report card, a hard copy of a notice in the mail. But that's related. I looked at board docs and I thought maybe that's something we should have a discussion around. And then
I think it's important to point out also, I'm sorry to say that these services like board docs are BOCES aidable. So we're looking at about, you know, a little more than half of whatever we spend on that comes back to us every year.
Great, thank you for clarifying that. And then the last thing I'll just say was NISBA policy services. That went up an awful lot. And, you know, I mean, we get an update, right? And we do a lot of the work when I was looking at that. Well, between 2016 and now, it's like almost $8,000 or something. I was just curious. There might be something.
Yeah, I'm not sure why that has increased.
About 8,000. I'm looking at page 3. I mean, from 2016, 17, it was 68, 45, and now it's 15.5. That's a lot of policies.
That's the actual for, that's
The budgeted? Okay.
the total for all memberships, conference expenses, other contractual, and NISBA. So the 15.5 is what's budgeted for all of the board contractual expenses. So that includes other memberships.
Okay, so they don't break out the policy services.
It's 800 in here.
Okay, it still went from 270 to 800, then I see it, right? Okay, I was just curious as far as what that's for the updates we get once a month?
And any services or calls that we make for any kind of assistance. And yeah, you're the head of the policy committee, so we could put it all on you.
That's why I asked.
You should make more calls.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Mr. Shaughnessy.
I think I'm going to be a little bit incoherent here because I'm concerned about the tax levy limit. And it's a very complicated calculation. And when you have the 1.99%, when did the board discuss that?
They didn't. That's why we have all these options.
Okay, so we need to discuss that before April 18th, right?
I think one of the issues is we look at, we look at where are we around balance and what that tax levy limit is. You know, that's why we want to make sure you saw here are our options and where we would be with those tax levy limits.
Okay, so so I have some concerns. One of the reasons that last year the tax levy limit was what, 1.35%?
Right.
And that's what we did, right?
Yes.
And we balanced that with extra money from the Was it $500,000 or $2 million, or an extra $1 million?
What we did last year was, at the time of budgeting, we put $1 million from the fund balance into the budget, and then later, a bit later in June or July, we took an extra $100 million out of the fund balance and put it into to lower the tax levy. Our tax levy last year was actually, what, 1.01? 1.06? So we actually, after the fact, without really anyone knowing, after it was already voted on, we lowered this tax levy by another 0.3% by putting in more money from the fund balance that we had. After we closed the books on June 30th, we had unexpended appropriations that we wanted to give back to the taxpayers, that the board voted at the time to give back to the taxpayers to lower the tax levy. So our tax levy last year was really 1.06, not 1.35. But that's the number that was voted on at the time.
Okay, so one of the things that leads to an increase in the tax levy limit is the addition of capital expenses which have been approved by the voters.
Correct.
So the difference between 1.35% and 3.6% this year, I presume a lot of that has to do with capital expenditure, I mean our share of capital expenses. So are we, and by reducing it to 1.99%, are we cutting into program by reducing the levy that taxpayers have already paid for? I mean, have already approved by referendum. I mean, for instance, last year you proposed going from 3.6 to 1.9 or 1.99. So that's a let's just say 3.6 to 2%. That's a 1.6% reduction. If we had done that last year with 1.35%, we would be 0.25 negative in our levy. And the other thing is, when you reduce the levy by $1.6 million, like you're proposing here, or that's one of the options, you never recover that. That's a permanent reduction in your levy limit.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's something to consider, because you're never going to be able to levy that amount again. I mean, it's not only 1.6 this year, it's 1.6 next year, and 1.6 million next year, and
yeah, that's one of the pitfalls of the tax levy limit. And that's one of the things you'll hear sometimes from politicians, that if your tax levy limit is 3.6, don't complain that you don't have enough money if you don't go to 3.6.
Well, I think the board needs to be aware of that. I mean,
but
we're not going to get this. If we go 1.99%, we're not going to get that 1.6. That's a $1.6 million reduction in our potential tax levy every year going forward.
Yeah, I think it's the equivalent of saying don't take a raise, right? That percent on your raise never comes back, and so that's a similar type of thing. Yes, absolutely.
I mean,
you're right on it.
Am I right or wrong? If you're wrong,
no, you're right. If we don't go to the tax levy limit that we're allowed every year, we lose whatever that difference is, because we could increase so if we went to 3.6, an increase of our tax levy by 3.6 this year, right? Next year, we're increasing at whatever the tax levy is of that new number that was increased by 3.6 instead of 1.99. So Jim is right, Mr. Shaughnessy is right. That 1.6, that never gets recovered.
And we're also at a point where at 1.99, we still have a deficit in our rollover budget of $640,000.
Yes.
So, I mean, and a rollover, I mean, so that completely eliminates any possibility of adding new programs, of adding new resources.
I think there was one year where we actually went to.
We've gone at or below the limit.
The rest of the time we've been under, but that was the question that I wrote down when you were going through that. Can we cut down on the fund balance transfer and go higher towards the limit, towards 3.6?
I think there's two things for the board to consider. I think Mr. Shaughnessy's point is valid in that that if we don't levy that, we do lose that. I think the other thing that is also valid is we talk about what is one of the goals of the budget that we formulate, and that's to, you know, balance the needs of our district with our community's values and their ability to pay. So I think that there's, you know, it's pretty, you've heard me say it 100 times, no one votes on the federal budget. No one votes on the state, the county, or the city budget, but people vote on the school district budget. And the, you know, so we have to find that balance between how can we provide what our students need, be fiscally, you know, responsible in doing that with how we're applying reserves, but also put out to our voters a fair budget that they can say yes to.
Well, I mean, I don't like to, you know, I know it's being a heretic to say that we should levy more taxes, but, you know, what is the projected cost of the pre-K program that we're going to begin in our budget in 2019? It's less than, it's not more than $1.6 million. I mean, that's, you know, when we,
1.6% or 1.6 million?
no, well, the levy, the 3.6% levy is 3.652 million.
1.6 million.
The tax levy at 1.9 is
But that's not money that, I mean, that's tax money that we're asking people to give us. It's not like it's money out, it's not like refusing a raise that someone somewhere is going to give you. That's taxpayer money that we're at, that we're either saying yes or, you know, we're asking you to levy or not.
Okay, but let's say we're going to have $1 million increase if we want to pay for our pre-K program starting in 2019. We're, you know, we're cutting 1.6 million off our potential tax levy right now. So where's that money going to come from?
So how do you suggest we balance our responsibilities to the taxpayers with the levy?
Well, I mean, the rollover budget at 3.6, it's still, we're under the, we're almost $1 million under there, right? The amount under the tax cap is $1 million, right? We're going from $1 million, you know, it's confusing. We're foregoing $1.6 million permanently. Is that what we want to do? Because we have a big expense coming up that we want to begin with next year in 2019.
But we can still ameliorate the effect by coming in somewhere in between. We don't want to raise taxes for the community, but by the same token, we don't want to fall short of what we need in budget, and we're not going to get any more money from the state.
Well, I know, but what I'm saying is we need to have a discussion about that. We just can't take this 1.99% budget and say that that's what it's going to be.
So I completely understand what you're saying. I understand that if we don't get it now, we lose it forever, right? So can you, Dr. Padalino, talk to us a little bit about this 3.6 budget, not the 3.6, but the 2.5 and the 1.99? I mean, where are we going to get these efficiencies from? Like, where are we going to find this 640, and where are we going to find this 125? Like, what are your thoughts about where we would get that money?
Well, I mean, the 640, where my thoughts are going there, we're going to look around, you know, again, poking into that special ed, which is an important piece for us to look at, is where one of the places we're looking right now. And we every day we dive in and we look to see where we are. I mean, I think that, you know, looking at the 2.5, I mean, 2.5. For all intents and purposes, is a balanced budget. I mean, it's $125,000, and again, that's money. But we can. I think there's some places for us to you know, find some efficiencies there. You know, 3.6, yeah, that puts us at $1 million to the good. And Mr. Shaughnessy is absolutely correct. If we don't levy to the limit, we forego that money, that increase forever. That is absolutely true. But your point is also correct that. That's taxpayer, you know, that's the taxpayers' money. So that balance, and I think Ms. Guido just said, how do we do that? And that's what you do. That's what the board does, makes that decision. And Mr. Shaughnessy said we should have that conversation. That's why we have this agenda.
What do you mean? Like, when you say we're
we need to look at the programs. I mean, right now we're looking at our self-contained programs. How many do we have, and where, and what, you know, are they full? We're looking at our out-of-district placements. Is bringing some students back from out-of-district placement going to save us some money in those areas? And we're doing some analysis around that. So, I mean, those are areas that we are seeing where we can make some, efficiencies without, losing programs to students with disabilities who absolutely need them. So those are the kind of things that we are hoping to be able to find some of the money there. I mean, we look all over the place for it, honestly. We'll go through, I know Ms. Woodard, Mr. Olson, and Ms. Bishop will go through this thing line by line, basically daily, looking for places for that money. It is the board's decision, obviously. Are there points in between 3.6 and 2.5 that we look at? 3%, sure, Mr. Olson is probably doing this head right now if you want to know what that would look like. And we can look in those ranges as well, please. But these were resting points that made sense to us that we felt we could communicate to the board.
Okay, can I take questions? Are you finished, Mr. Shaughnessy?
Well, I would like to know what component, and going from 1.35% last year to 3.6% this year, what was the capital expenses that contributed to that increase?
Well, first of all, the local component of the calculation was higher, and the CPI was 2%. So it wasn't just the capital component. The capital component, I think, was about, well, the capital component is itemized in there. It went from 2.8 to 3.35. So that's not completely the driver.
Yeah.
The tax-based growth factor is a much bigger driver than this.
Right.
It's on the top.
And
The top
so
side.
that will change every year regardless of our capital tax levy that exclusion that we have.
So the tax levy, so the CPI component is 2%, and
Right.
last year was 1.01. So it's essentially 1%. So of the 1.6 percentage points, 1% is CPI, increase in CPI, and another $500 or $700,000, $750,000 in capital tax levy. So that's 1.75 million increase from those two items, not program, but inflation and capital expense. So that's more than the. I just think we're harming. I think we're limiting ourselves. I mean, we know that the rollover budget next year is going to include the expenses for the pre-K program.
Mrs. Jordan, and then Mr. Michael, and then we'll come back.
I really appreciate Mr. Shaughnessy raising that concern because I think it is accurate. And when we had our meeting, all of the school districts in the county feel the same way, that, this formulation is really tricky and not being, not having that kind of mind, it's really mind-boggling to me. But I do think that we have to be responsible, as you said, to our district, but I don't think we should go all the way to a 1.99. I'm more comfortable like at the 2.50 range or maybe even 2.75, looking at that, but I don't think that it's responsible to limit what we can raise in the future, not knowing what the future is going to bring in terms of what the state is going to, decide on. Who knows? And, I heard scary things on the federal level. I just heard a scary thing on one here tonight. So, I just think that we should not give up all of it, but I do think that we have to moderate it in some way because we have a very strapped community and we want to try to find that balance, and I think that they should be receptive to us trying to at least balance it. Maybe not take the whole thing that we are able to, because we recognize that it's a hardship for them. But also, I don't think it's fair to forego everything we're entitled to raise either. So I do appreciate both of those comments, and that's kind of where I stand.
One thing that we have to keep in mind that we may be entering an inflationary period, and as we go forward, inflation over 2%, we're still the inflationary increase is limited by the tax levy law at 2%. So if there's 4% inflation, we're still only allowed to increase 2%. The levy, okay, that line is going to be 2%.
Oh, I was going to ask Dr. Palladino. I got a letter from, we all got a letter from Assembly McCahill stating that we're getting some extra financial aid, state aid. You know, those numbers, about the same with our projection there, right?
All the state aid that is in the budget, in the enacted New York State budget for the Kingston City School District is in this calculation.
Okay, the other thing I wanted to say is about Mr. Shanner's concerns. We said we're going to throw in $2 million for our fund balance. So if you want to go back to that, reverse it, whatever we did last year with $1 million, and then we can, you know what I mean, increase a little bit the tax levy so we stay with normal rate. Well, that's the other option we have to do.
Well, what is the actual inflation rate? I mean, the limit is 2%, but what was the secret? What was it?
2.13.
So that's 1,500s that our expenses are going up that we can't levy.
Well, it's 2.13 this year, next year going to be higher.
Right, well, that's what I'm saying, but you're limiting your levy, and you have a 3% inflation rate next year, you lose 1%, plus you lose the 1.6 that you can't levy this year. I mean, it's hard. It's not something that I like to think that way, but it's there.
I think we have to moderate it. I think we have to find something 2.5 or maybe a little above 2.5, and that's what I would support.
Well, the 2.62 that you see here, that's still inclusive of the fund balance allocations, balances the budget. And that's a balanced budget that is still a percentage point below what we can levy, and about 0.7%, well, 0.6% higher than the 1.99, which is just going just below that 2%. So that's a balance. Is that the moderation or the in between that we're looking for?
Well, I still think we should look for ways to save money and perhaps not put in the 2 million, if we can. I'm in favor of that, but I also am in favor of the 2.6 or 2.6. I just think that we have to moderate it. As much as I would like to give the taxpayers back everything, I think that we're setting them up for a terrible fall if we do that. Because then it's just we're going to have to cut programs, and then we hurt our students, and that is not acceptable.
I agree that we should moderate. I wouldn't go all the way to the tax cap. I completely understand what Mr. Shaughnessy is saying. And maybe maybe the 2.6 is the place. I mean, it's where it balances, so maybe that is where we end up. I feel like I need to kind of see in those other options exactly that means if we're actually going to be in a deficit. So what are we cutting? And looking through the budget, I did have some questions about ways that maybe, because one thing that we had talked about in the past is really looking at our overtime. And what does our overtime look like, and can we reduce some of that? And it looks like, and I know that's complicated, and I know everyone works hard, and I'm sure a lot of it has to do with snow, but maybe that is something we can think about. I'm also seeing a lot of school data stuff here. So on page 15, we have student management, school data services from BOCES, and then on the following page, we have educational data facilitators. I think this is all like testing. And do we still need those kinds of services when we have an in-house data personnel?
Well, I think the educational data service, that is the in-house, because the school the e-school data is our student management system, which is what we keep track of all of our students, their attendance, their grade, you know, that is our student management system. That's what that's how we run the district through BOCES, yes. And again, remember the aid that comes back on us.
Right. And so then this, on page 16, this educational data facilitators, plural,
That's Gary and his team. And again, I want to remind you that when we did that, we did eliminate other positions that were there to kind of balance that.
Can I ask, I know that you were planning on scheduling more budget forums. You had one on the 20th of March?
We had one on the 20th.
Right. I think it behooves us to have another before the audit and finance meeting on the 17th, because the meeting, you know, to approve the budget next day. So I think we should have a budget forum. You know, I hate to give you all more to do, but I think we need to have a budget forum and have discussions, a really robust discussion at another forum prior to audit finance on the 17th. Is that a doable?
Absolutely.
And this BOCES data has gone up significantly every year. I understand we get paid back on it, but it's like a $60,000 increase.
Well, and some of it is different things that we've changed that we started to use. We started to use the report card in some cases. There's different things that we started to do. We also used to do some of this stuff in-house that we then now have them do. So there's changes in how we use that service that can make the price fluctuate.
I won't be here on the 18th, so I have to make my pitch now.
17th? Will you be here for the budget forum next week that we're can't schedule it?
I mean, last budget forum.
Hasn't
didn't
been
have-
scheduled yet.
Go ahead.
So, I mean, I just want to say, I mean, one of the things I'm being a little bit strident now is because I'm not
Well, I
going to be
think,
here on the 18th.
many of us concur, but we want to see what it looks like there and what.
And again, I'm not
Selective
gonna,
abandonment of anything?
I think there's selective abandonment.
Abandonment.
So I think that, you know, within very few dollars, you know, these benchmarks give you a pretty good idea where we're going to land, you know, a week from now. You know, these are our tax levy limit, you know, benchmarks that we think, and this is where we're going to land. There's, you know, 3.6, again, we'll land pretty good, you know, in a pretty good place. 2.6 is our budget. 1.99. Now you know me now, but I think this is the sixth budget that I've done here. I will always show you one that is either at where our tax levy limit is or at 2%, because we all know that there are many people who have hammered into their minds purposely at different levels of government that 2% is the tax cap. So I always like to show that number around 2% so we can see what that means to us.
But then it behooves us to make that very clear at the next budget forum or in further discussion tonight that that is not what it means. And I know we say that until our faces are.
How many times
I know.
heard you say that?
But
It's not a levy, it's not a cap, and it's not 2%.
and it's not likely to change anytime soon, as long as it's linked to, you know, rent control in New York City, it's not going to change.
No, and as long as it's this kind of calculation that if there's about, you know, only 4 people in the room who really understand, it's hard for us to communicate why this fluctuates the way it does to our taxpayers.
Any further questions? Mrs. Slack?
I have one on the BOCES Alternative Education Program. I know it's going to be a new program next year, so it's $250,000. How many students will that be, and where are they this year?
Yeah, they're there this year. We've maneuvered money this year to send students there. We have, I think, 6 students there. The thing about that, again, there's aid that comes back on that, number one. And number two, thing about that program is as that program grows, the cost to the districts goes down. So we saw it in P-TECH, we'll see it in this, in the Phoenix program, the alternate ed program, is as we are always the early adopters, you know. We're always probably the first people to jump in with both feet on new programs. And as you see, as you know, our other districts in the county start adding 2 and 3 students, the overall, the cost of the program is the cost of the program, whether there's 10 kids there, whether there's 25. But if there's 25 there, it's appraised the cost across all of the districts in the BOCES. So, you know, originally when we talked about the P-TECH program, it looked like it was going to be a $25,000 a student program, and now it's down to about the same cost as a full-day vocational program because now it's fully functioning. So it's an investment as far as I'm concerned, programmatically. I think the teaching and learning and our building principals would agree. It's an investment programmatically as far as we're concerned in students who are not finding success in a regular, you know, at Kingston High School. There's some students, and we're not talking about students who are, you know, long-term discipline problems for the most part. These are students, for the most part, who are, they're just not functioning in a 2,000 student, you know, high school, and they are finding some success down there. Or, you know, and we're still figuring out just exactly how that program's gonna work for our kids, but we do like P-TECH and you know, jumping in there to be part of this program so we can support all different kinds of learners in the Kingston City School District. So there's a cost to it. Again, cut that in about half is what it really costs us, but that price we'll see that price go down next year for sure as more people participate.
So I have a question about state aid. I think you mentioned that with the budget that was approved, it was $1.2 million.
Yes.
And the governor's, you said the governor's budget was 3 point something, 300,
Another 335
or 370,000. So that was sort of discretionary. That was the discretionary amount. There was more aid in the aid run that was cost-based.
Right.
So,
The money I'm talking about, The money I'm talking about is our foundation aid, which is the real money, not the expense-driven aids. So we see more money coming back as an expense-driven aids. It's really about getting more accurate about what we spent and what we have coming back. Like I'm talking about with BOCES, we get that money coming back.
so it was a $900,000, almost a $900,000 or $800,000 increase in the discretionary money. Is that right?
In the governor's budget, yes.
From the governor's budget.
Right. And then another 400,000 or so.
Right. So the governor was about $900,000, and then about $400,000 in the over that 900 in the so 1.27 or something like that total increase in state, about 4%, a little over 4.02%. Year to year, 1.2.
Can you talk specifically in terms of resources, when you say we want to grow our SEL programs and our restorative justice programs, like what exactly would our resources be going towards in kind of in growing that?
Well, I think one of the things that I talk about is training. I mean, that's a really big part of this is training. I mean, you talk a lot about restorative justice, but we don't know how to do it effectively.
At one point about maybe having someone to manage it?
Oh, that is, you know, I think that finding a point person, again, is part of what we're talking about, looking at what we do administratively. I think a lot of those answers come from us looking at our administrative structure, where we can find things that we can do better and things that we can, I don't want to say add, but things that we can change because maybe what we were doing before isn't what we need to be doing now. And we shifted our priorities, right? I mean, our priorities before were very structured around curriculum, around changing what we were doing to the Common Core, about changing our instruction in the classroom, about implementing APPR, being able to do that effectively, and we've kind of changed our priorities to look at, and we've done it, you know, a little bit each budget, but we've really changed our priorities, looking at our social emotional wellness and restorative justice as a way to, you know, work with students on top of the things that we've already done. So looking at our administrative structure is a big piece of this, and that's a lot of hard work.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, I'd like to request that that's a formal process, that we get a report about that. You know, looking at the administrative structures, it is where, and a plan for moving forward. But that be a formal thing that we discuss at the board meeting, you know, in the next year, few months, before the next budget process, for sure.
Yes, I think there will probably be talking about that sooner than that, for sure. And I was just taking darts. with administrative pictures for who gets what job, what responsibility.
How good are you with ours?
Not really good. You saw my new glasses.
Reverend Chance.
I'm still not clear on this BOCES budget, where we show, when it shows the administrative on page 12, and it talks about the administration, there's like a 400K increase in that. What is that?
Okay, the BOCES administrative budget is not about administrators. That's the charge that we receive from BOCES for being part of their cooperative of the cooperative. And there was, I'm going to let Mr. Olson talk a little bit. There was some changes in the way that money is that charge is charged to the district. So, but I'm going to let Mr. Olson give you the kind of the details on it.
I should let Mr. Shaughnessy. The BOCES budget had this big reserve, as we know, that the reserve for OPEB, for retiree health care. They've been winding down, and that's one factor in it, because they were able to support, I think, the administrative budget to some degree and give us bigger refunds while that existed. And now that it's going to be wound down this year, there's one factor that's driving the administrative cost up. I think now they've also allocated more of those kind of expenses to the administrators in the budget, to their benefit lines they're allocating. So they would say, BOCES would say, that increase is being offset by declines in the non-administrative budget. And the overall BOCES budget is going up by about
1.2 million, and that 400,000 is just the administration component of BOCES, so that's no additional programs, that's no additional students, that's 400,000, over 400,000.
If you remember, I think it might have been 2 years ago in the fall, Dr. Corey came to the board and went through the presentation on why this was changed. Again, it was about an audit that really found that they had a reserve that they weren't supposed to have, and they were able to use that reserve to offset some expenses that they were told they had to start spending it down. So they spent it down by giving it back to us, more or less. Now that reserve is gone, and they have to start really charging us what, again, they probably would have been all along had they not had that illegal, for lack of a better word, reserve.
Is the administration cost in BOCES allocated per student, or is it just a flat cost no matter if we have 2 students or?
It's that administrative is a charge that is put on the districts by Arwada.
Arwada.
Right? Yeah, it's Arwada. Let's not go there. Let's just leave that alone. I'm sorry. That's what we call it, and we'll just talk about it. But so Kingston's administrative, so just to kind of make it as simple as possible, Kingston's administrative fee for budget for BOCES is higher than everyone else in Ulster County. It's really it is more or less a per student, not necessarily participation. It's a participation. Yeah, right. It's about the size of the district, and the number of students. Then we pay. But we pay the same as services. So if a student from the smallest school district, a smaller school district, let's say, Highland and Kingston, who go to the vocational program, pay the same. And the tuitions are the same. But the administrative cost is a bit larger for larger school districts and smaller, for small schools.
And that's just a function of a formula.
That's the cooperative.
Right.
That's how it works. And that which is what BOCES is at the end of the day. It's a
Well, I think that our participation is roughly in line with what our overall enrollment is anyway.
I think, we use it.
But we pay for every
I
use.
know, but I think some of what's going on here is that sometimes they try to moderate the co-serve by allocating a little more to administrative and vice versa. I'm not sure that that's entirely correct, but that goes on, I think.
So So there's no way to ensure, for instance, that the program isn't being subsidized by our increased share in administrative costs.
Well,
That's not happening.
but I think that administrative increase is going to every, it's the same increase going to every district.
Percentage-wise.
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 Right,
Yeah.
Arwada.
Oh, wow.
Any other questions?
Just kind of like kind of a little summary comment that I, from my perspective. So priorities for this budget, keeping class size low, restorative justice and SEL programs. And I really think we need a point person on that. I think just giving training, and we've seen this, and then just having some, isn't going to mean that someone can just go off and do a circle, but you kind of need the person there. And early literacy. And I think, I hear Mr. Shaughnessy's point, I think we need to moderate, because I think that we're not guaranteed a passage at a 3.6, even if you can go there. So it is about balancing, and it's about the fact that then the voters have to agree. And so I think that we need to moderate.
And I think one of the words that I want to continue to, that Dr. Strobel said I want to keep in front of everyone's mind is priority. And much of what we are able to talk about now, we are able to talk about it because we prioritize student achievement. And we don't want to abandon the work that and the investment that we put there just because we found success. We found success for a reason. There's a structure in place that has created that and will maintain that and will advance that. And what happens is we lose sight of that because we just take that as the new normal and forget that there's work that goes on there, that there's systems in place that make that happen. And we decide we have a new priority and we shift our resources to the new priority and maybe we'll see some success there. But then the question starts coming of why is this other area slipping? So priority is important, and I think that we need to, again, that's our work, and to come back to you with the best solutions we have. But I think I think it's important that I remind everyone that we have made some very significant progress over the last few years, and we've done it because we've committed to that, and that's been our priority. So, and I know we've invested, emotionally and resource-wise in our social emotional, and can we do better with restorative justice? Yes, we can. But if we start looking at restorative justice and social emotional at the expense of other things, we need to find a way to find that balance, to keep that balance. Systems are in place, but they need to be maintained. We're looking at how we can do that. And that's our goal is to make sure, and we're prioritizing around social emotional wellness and that the impact that can have on student achievement as well. We're very, we walk that tightrope. We don't want to pull that one string and all of that one straw and all the marbles go down. No one plays that game anymore. Whatever was the name of that game, Kerplunk. No one played Kerplunk. So we're trying to figure out which is the right straw, to pull and not have the marbles go down.
Mr. Michael.
Yes, are we making any plans or taking any steps for the extra security and the safety in our schools? Are we having any money going to invest with the new budget?
I think we have not put new money into this budget. But one of the important things to point out is the money that we do spend and the systems and the procedures that are in place around school safety. We have 4 school resource officers. We have a significant investment in our security teams. We have increased the security teams at our middle schools. Again, we've also, not that this has anything to do with money, but making sure we continue and maintain and strengthen our relationships with law enforcement, which is one of the things we've been doing over the last several months. To revisit and talk about those, our relationships. And just 2 weeks ago, we had a great meeting here with the city and the police department and the school district to kind of remind ourselves of what we're doing and why we're here and what we need to do for our students. You know, we continue with our safety plans, our safety procedures, which are what we've done. And I'm not, we're a Singapore Elementary School District. We have buzzers at every door. We have school resource officers and security people. We have well thought out, well practiced, and well drilled plans in all of our schools. So we feel we have a good, safe school district and plans for just about any eventuality. Now, you know, I don't say that lightly, and not thinking we're immune to what goes on in the world. But I think we've become, I think we're safe. I think we're a harder target than we would be if we hadn't made the investments we've made. You know, cameras at the middle schools have been expanded. Cameras at the elementary schools have been expanded. Cameras at the high school continue to be significant. So I think that we're, in our new project, looking at making sure that we have, and again, Mr. Cochran will talk more about this, but you know, new project, having that entryway that a person checks in a certain spot, and having that, what do we call it, you know, that kind of, I call it a man trap, it's something called it, so no one comes in without getting checked, no one gets through that second set of doors. You know, the buzzers, the security presence. I'm pleased with where we are security-wise in the school district.
And to clarify, any improvements to the buildings that we would want to make to ensure safety would come out of the smart schools bond?
It could come out of smart schools.
We would need to add it to the budget.
We would not need, we do have money in the Smart Schools Bond Act from a couple of years ago that can be used for safety. I think we need to look at what those improvements could be in moving forward. Again, I think, you know, we have the things that are recommended out there are things that we already have in place. So I feel like we've done, you know, Mr. Beleza and now Mr. Parker, succeeding him, has, you know, been up on what the most important things to do are, and we've implemented them.
I just want to remind the board that we're going to have presentations on safety at the 18th meeting.
We don't have to now, because I just did.
On April 18th, so.
Take their
Just a question, I know the SRO, we showed like $400K in the budget for that. Does the city or the town of Ulster contribute anything to the payment of the SRO?
We pay, that is our allotment, and that's what we pay between health insurance and salary for each of them. Any work they do overtime or summer or whatever like that, that is you know, the city's responsibility, but the 10 months they're with us, we pay the whole rate.
Mr. Shaughnessy?
Just two brief, actually I forgot one already. The BOCES administrative budget will be discussed at the annual meeting on Monday at Fort Ewan, so you can ask Dr. Corey there what the increase, how that worked out. We'll be better able to explain it, but certainly will be.
Any other questions for Dr. Payne?
Oh, have we used any of the Smart Schools funds?
No, we've not.
So we still have $5 million?
Yes, 5.6.
Any further questions for Dr. Payne? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn to a special executive session for matters which will entail public safety disclosed. And we are not likely to come out of executive with any action, so we will open the doors to the public again, but I don't think we're going to see anything, so. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.